Hello, everyone. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle, and welcome to The Five. We begin with some very upsetting news tonight. Otto Warmbier, the American who was just released by North Korea after nearly a year and a half in captivity, has died. He passed away earlier after being sent home in a vegetative state by the ruthless regime last week. Otto was only 22 years old. Our prayers go out to his family and to all who loved him and prayed for his safe return. His father, Fred, fought back tears Thursday while holding a news conference on his son's release. He didn't hold back his anger at North Korea, however, for terrorizing his son.
He was so brutally treated for so long. There is no excuse for any civilized nation to have kept his condition secret and denied him top-notch medical care. There's no excuse for the way the North Koreans treated our son.
Truly heartbreaking and outrageous. President Trump addressed Otto's passing this afternoon.
I just wanted to pass on word that Otto Warmbier has just passed away. He spent a year and a half in North Korea. A lot of bad things happened, but at least we got him home to be with his parents, where they were so happy to see him, even though he was in very tough condition, but he just passed away a little while ago. It's a brutal regime, and we'll be able to handle it.
Secretary of State Rex Tillerson helped bring Otto home, and he issued a statement earlier saying the administration holds North Korea accountable for Otto's unjust imprisonment and demands the release of 3 other Americans who are being illegally detained. Greg, when this news broke today, obviously it's incredibly heartbreaking to imagine what this family has gone through. They weren't even able to receive word of their son for over a year's period of time, and then to learn that this fate had befallen him at the direct hands of this brutal regime. I don't think there can be any peace for them for what has happened here to their son, and there really shouldn't be for any of us as Americans because of what transpired.
Yeah, it was really a year and a half month execution and torture. It was a cruel prank to play on grieving parents. And the only reason why they returned him, I would imagine, is because they didn't want him to die in custody. And you might think, oh, maybe that was out of compassion or fear. They just didn't want to pay the bills. Mm-hmm. I think it is just they dumped him like garbage. And there has to be a way to make them pay. And I've been thinking about this for a long time. You know, we have this executive order banning assassinations. Rewrite it. I mean, that's a first step. Kill them so it makes it look like natural causes, so it removes confrontation and perhaps opens talks with somebody else. Or you do the other thing, which is what we have been doing, which may be the only solution, which is you just kind of like let it go and you treat North Korea like that weird house in your neighborhood that your parents say, don't go by that house. Whatever you do, don't go in that house. It's a strange family. They do weird things. Steer clear across the street. Don't go near it. Mm-hmm. It is the weird haunted house on planet Earth. And you don't go near it. You just wait and wait and wait until time, maybe the guy's heart gives out. Natural causes, who knows? Yeah. Something.
So obviously, Dana, Kim Jong-un, a brutal dictator in North Korea, and the blood of Otto Warmbier is on his hands. Right. He bears the responsibility, and his regime does. But I think something needs to be done about it, because I don't think this guy, I think he's too dangerous. I don't think we can just wait for him to expire from natural causes. But we've also, I think, if you talk to them in national security, think this is our biggest concern is North Korea and their nuclear proliferation and the abilities that they currently have.
Indeed, because unlike when we were kids, the house on the corner that nobody wants to go by, that shouldn't go by, now has nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. And so it has to be dealt with in some way. And I sent an email to you guys earlier about, you used to talk about Iran wanting the nuclear weapons, mm-hmm. and that there were 2 clocks. There's a clock of Iran trying to get it, and then there's ours, which is how long are we willing to put up with it before we stop it. Mm-hmm. And President Obama tried his way. I don't necessarily think that is working. And now we have a situation that's probably even more dire and more sinister, at least in the near term. One of the things that Secretary Tillerson said is that it was unjust imprisonment, but he didn't go as far to say that the North Koreans are responsible for the murder mm-hmm. of Mr. Warmbier. Now, Marco Rubio, who's on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, he said, make no mistake, Warmbier was murdered by the North Korean regime.
True.
So that clock on our end, there will be pressure to try to speed it up. I think that President Trump is well guided by Mattis, Tillerson, McMaster, and lots of other people, but also that we get to the question about what do we do with China, and the question of how long are we willing to be patient with China before they start doing something. There was an article in the New York Times over the weekend that says that basically they're just slow walking the pressure that President Trump asked them to put on North Korea, that they're just sort of like waiting. And so I think that's where you'll see the next step is Tillerson probably pressing through China.
Accelerating, yeah, and plus we have leverage in China in so many things, especially trade. There's things that they want, well, there's things that they're going to need to do, and we deserve justice for an American that was murdered at the hands of North Korea.
Yeah, we need to accelerate all pressure on China in order to solve this problem. Make no mistake, this was an act of war, and I think President Trump needs to respond accordingly. It was premeditated, it was savage, it was humiliating, and it was depraving. It was disgusting. And what happens in a hostage situation? You know, when the guys start killing the hostages, that's when the teams go in and take action. I don't know if you have to do it overtly or covertly or what, but it's not just this. When they're test firing missiles, when they're trading in illicit arms and drugs and, you know, causing chaos with their neighbors, something has to be done here, because right now, I guess a coup is potentially on the table. They have these war games in South Korea, a decapitation squad or something like that, where if anything does dust up on the DMZ, what they'll do is, you know, they'll take out some military installations, but they'll also go after the leadership in a very targeted and effective way. There was reports that some special operators were doing the war games with the South Koreans. There's I think it was the USS Michigan, one of our attack subs that's off the coast there that often helps transport the SEAL Team 6 guys. So, you know, that's on the table, and I think Kim needs to understand it is on the table, because I think President Trump, and I haven't ever seen him that disturbed or emotional in a very long time during those remarks right there. I'm sure he takes this personally.
Of course.
And, you know, he had a huge hand, and his team did, in bringing Otto back. And now that success is really tarnished. So I really want to see a very stern response.
That's the problem. Juan, more should have been done earlier to get to this point. The wait-and-see approach ends up in deadly results like this, and an ending that is unacceptable in every way.
Well, that just brings us to a really important point, which is that you still have about 20 prisoners being held by the North Koreans, Kimberly. So, you know, Greg said it kind of in an explicit way that, you know, they dumped him. I mean, they were getting rid of him. It's not that this was a result of anything that wasn't being done previously. The pressure has been put there, and I think President Trump has put more pressure. He tried to get President Xi of China to agree to something. He thought that meeting in April that Xi had bought into the idea that, you know what, this is a dangerous situation for the globe, for the world.
It is.
And that President Xi would take action. Well, he hasn't taken any action, despite the fact that Trump has held off on claims of currency manipulation and other steps that he could be taking against China. He really thought that he had an ally, and so far that ally has not acted. Even people who are on the border with North Korea and China say there's been nothing done in terms of stopping the trade that continues to feed money into this dictator.
They did stop the coal shipments. That was a big success of the diplomacy by the Trump administration.
I don't see
coal
it
is what
making any
powers
difference.
that economy in the north. But
well, I don't see it making any difference. And to me, let me just stop here and just stop with the politics for a second. What Fred, his dad, said today about how when they brought his son home, that he could tell that the child could not speak or hear, apparently. But just in terms of his countenance, the father said, he could see that that boy was more at peace knowing he was back at home in Ohio. And I just got to say,
when he had arrived, when he said this, he looked anguished when he first saw him.
It just hurt my heart to think of a dad in that situation on Father's Day.
You know, can you imagine that, going through that and probably thinking, you know, this is the last time that his beautiful son, who had so much promise, was so well loved and regarded by so many, will be greatly missed. You know, with a bright, incredible future to provide and give back to this country, and to be murdered like that by North Korea, it is so grotesque and so unacceptable.
And they kept it secret from the family.
Yes, I know.
They didn't know
that
he was in this condition. I mean, they were trying to reach out to find out about their son, and they couldn't, and they had no idea he was in this state.
They were denied any consular access or information, and the information now that we have is that he fell into this, coma, and then eventually the state of, unresponsive wakefulness the day after he was sentenced. So 15 years hard labor.
I would just add that. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to add that, North Korea, one of the things that Kim Jong-un says that he wants is to be treated with respect by the world. Mm-hmm. And yet there are norms around the world for humanitarian cases. They were all ignored in this case. There was no response to any of the consular requests. There was no responsiveness to the treaties that are signed in terms of how do you deal with people around the world. And remember, they treated our citizen like this. They do it to their own as well. There's a complete disregard for innocent life there.
Greg, you had a comment.
Well, I was just, after the Leon Klinghoffer thing, Reagan sent those F-14s and intercepted the Egyptian airliner that was carrying the hijackers. It was a pretty decisive thing to do. I don't know what the equivalent is there. I do know that when growing up with the Cold War, there was mutually assured destruction. Russia knew that we could kill them, and we knew that they could kill us. The difference is with North Korea is that we can kill them, but there's a 50-50 shot with them, but generally it's more about the people around North Korea that you worry about. So we're hamstrung in the sense of what do you do in a retaliation with brute force. So what is it left? And that is covert or strategic maneuvers. Seems like the only way to go.
And one of the last things I'd like to say is I think in Syria, what got President Trump to act finally were those images of the children and the mothers that were gassed by Assad, and that spurred that barrage of missiles. This might be one of those same emotional moments that might cause him to take more dramatic action. Well,
and he would be more than justified in doing so, is the point, because of the murder of this young man that we mourn tonight. Otto, you are in our prayers, along with your beautiful family tonight. May God watch over you and them. Rest in peace. Back in a moment.
Steve Scalise languished in a coma. MSNBC's Joy Reid offered her hot take on how he got there. She tweeted, "Scalise was shot by a white man with a violent background and saved by a black lesbian police officer, and yet, she blamed the race of the shooter, didn't bring up his beliefs." Talk about racism. Why would she do that? To avoid the shooter's beliefs? He was her network's biggest fan. But it's all the result of the left making politics personal. If you don't believe a person is just wrong, but evil, like I've said before, then you can say or do anything. I'd say she dug a hole for herself with that tweet, but then she dug an entire plot.
It's a delicate thing because, obviously everybody is wishing the congressman well and hoping that he recovers. But Steve Scalise has a history that we've all been forced to sort of ignore on race.
You saw that butt coming, didn't you? Right after the fake compassion, she kept going.
He did come to leadership after some controversy over attending a white nationalist event, which he says he didn't know what it was. He also co-sponsored a bill to amend the Constitution to define marriages between a man and a woman. He voted for the House health care bill, which, as you said, would gut health care for millions of people, including 3 million children. And he co-sponsored a bill to repeal the ban on semi-automatic weapons. Because he is in jeopardy and everyone is pulling for him, are we required in a moral sense to put that aside at the moment?
Gosh.
Yes, you are, Joy. So nice that you're pulling for him. Let me ask you this. A woman is raped. Do you feel compelled afterward to dredge up her stance on abortion or global warming? This idiocy spread like a virus. Washed-up Star Trek troll George Takei copied Joy. The officer who saved bigoted, homophobic Rep. Steve Scalise during baseball practice was a black lesbian. So who is he insulting? Scalise, who trusted this woman with his life, or the woman herself? George seems surprised that the officer did her job. It's creepy. Now, maybe it's rude to point out how repugnant this is, but at least I'm not doing it while Joy or George are in medical crisis. Scalise may have been in a medically induced coma, but these people are in moral ones. What is the need, Dana, because you're a Twitterer.
Less and less these days.
But what is the need to register a hot take afterwards?
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. Can we ban
the word hot
phrase?
take? I hate it.
Yeah, okay,
but
so
I'm using it
consider
sarcastic.
It banned?
Can I have a hot take? That music bumping was the worst, I think, music you've ever played.
That's the Revillos. a punk band from
When
the
we
70s.
have you
Gotcha.
committed
Yes.
involuntarily, we'll play this
That's
clip
what you
of that
play
music.
Gitmo detainees when
Yeah, I
you're
was
trying
gonna
to
say,
torture
that was
them.
this
He
song's
was
called The
playing it
Fiend.
for Joy Reid.
Yes.
That was
It was punishment.
I think this is what's interesting is that everybody seems to think that they can speak on behalf of Officer Griner.
Yeah.
And she has been
So
very
true.
quiet, right? So, and why don't we just let her recover and speak when she wants to? But to your take, your hot take,
No,
law
mine was a-
enforcement always does its job.
Yeah.
Right? They do their job regardless of politics of any sort. And believe me, you can actually work and do your job even if you disagree with somebody that is sitting with you.
Yes.
Here we are, all doing it every night.
Yes.
It's not impossible to do.
I'm sure, Juan, that if I fell over here, you would give me mouth-to-mouth resuscitation.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
You-
But I would.
Right.
I would
You're just like,
I can tell by Dana's hacking laugh that she thinks that would be
my
pretty
God.
hilarious.
I would watch that.
Everybody always fakes that.
But do you know what's?
Greg.
I thought it was weird that she pointed out the race of the shooter and not his beliefs, Juan. I mean, I thought that was like that was just glare. Like, why does he have to be a white shooter?
Well, I think we live in such a racially conscious country. I mean, the fact is, if the shooter had been black or an immigrant or Hispanic or something, everybody say, "Oh my God!" And you can imagine the blow up. So this is the left, Joy Reid, saying, "Oh, this is our reaction. It's quite different, and we're going to point out that the two cops involved were black people who saved his life."
Why
But-
step you out of the ordinary?
And I appreciate your point, because remember, this is such an important point that in the middle of the campaign last year with Donald Trump, when Trump brought up the Hispanic heritage of a judge,
Right.
guess what? Then all of a sudden you saw Paul Ryan say, you know what, when you say that someone can't do their job because of their race, that's the definition of racism. This is the definition of racism. If you say a cop can't do his job because he's black, or she's black, or she is of a different racial, sexual orientation, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
You know what I had a problem with, though? She's calling this cop the black lesbian.
Yes.
Yes.
She's not even calling her name. How demeaning is that? Like, oh, the black lesbian shot the white congressman. I mean, that's not how people speak. And I don't think the police officer would like to hear herself described on national television as the black lesbian. It just doesn't sound that good. And leave it to MSNBC to turn a partisan political assassination into democratic identity politics. It's like when there's a surgeon, you know, they bring someone into the ER room. It doesn't matter if the guy's a rapist, you know, the guy's a Republican, the guy's Canadian. It doesn't matter.
Canadian.
And to whoever, you know, throw whatever you want to in there. They're there to save their life. Justice should be blind in this matter.
The officers on the scene, the EMTs that arrived, tried to save the shooter's life.
Exactly.
I'd have a
So-
problem with that. But go ahead, Kimberly.
Yeah.
Such a mean person.
The female officer's skill set, her ability,
Yeah.
her patriotism, her dedication to Congressman Scalise has nothing to do with her gender or sexual identity. It is so demeaning that Joy did that and said that she's actually an example of the problem that exists in this country. And when you see something like this, where the left always, they don't want to identify anybody by, you know, a sexual gender orientation. They see all things. But yet here, then they want to, oh, no, this and that. And then they want to call people out. They want to label them. They want to box them. They want to confine them because it
Yeah.
suits and it's politically expedient for their argument.
Yeah, you know, you could just sense with Takai and Joy and everyone else who'd used how excited they were when they found out the police officer was a black lesbian.
But you
Oh,
know
that's
what?
why you.
Do you know what is kind of annoying about it? That whole thing had been going around on Twitter for 2 days
Yes, yeah.
before they actually, because everyone was like, that's actually not something we're going to say. We actually are too classy to say that.
Yeah.
It took them 2 days before she was the first one to do it.
Yeah,
They
and it
didn't
was-
treat Gabby Giffords like this. I don't know why they're treating
it was
Scalise.
horrible.
Sad, sad, sad.
All right.
Well, the good news is he's
doing
improving.
great. He's
Yeah,
improving.
yeah. They had him in a medically induced coma, and they brought him out, and apparently he's getting there.
So they say he has a chance of an excellent recovery.
Excellent.
Thanks
All
be
right.
to God. And to the doctors and the nurses who took
Yeah.
such wonderful care of him.
Yeah, first we should find out what their identity is before we compliment them. That's what the MSNBC way.
This is
Would
a
be-
gender-neutral discussion,
That
Gregory.
is true. I'm of an indeterminate gender.
We're going to leave,
Oh,
but
we
well,
knew
we've
that.
always known it.
Yes.
But it's charming nonetheless.
Yes. Is the Russia investigation becoming too political? That's next on The Five.
President Trump has made no secret. He finds the special counsel's investigation into his team's possible collusion with Russia baseless, calling it a, quote, witch hunt on Twitter again over the weekend. No incriminating evidence has emerged, but that has not stopped some in the mainstream media from speculating that Mr. Trump's job is in danger.
President Trump has been in office for less than 5 months, and it's fair to say his presidency is now in some peril.
Legal scholar Alan Dershowitz is raising major concerns about the politics of this investigation.
This is becoming very political when you have the Justice Department itself being on both sides, prosecuting the president possibly, and also serving as defense witnesses for the president. We have to stop criminalizing political differences.
And here's Newt Gingrich on what might have to happen due to all these leaks.
Now they're talking about not the Russians, they're talking about obstruction. Now they're talking about going and looking at financial files, if you believe the leak. And I said yesterday, you get 2 more leaks like this, Rosenstein's going to have to appoint a special counsel to investigate the special counsel.
So, Kimberly, one of the things I think that's been going around these circles is that there's a difference between obstructing of justice and then there's Donald Trump saying, hey, guys, no evidence of, there's no collusion, never talked to the Russians, I don't know anything about anything. Everybody says I'm not guilty of collusion, there's no evidence anywhere. What's going on? Can you help me handle this? Can you stop what's going on? Isn't that just kind of someone trying to basically tell everybody to back off?
I don't know about that transcript that you just gave, but I understand what you mean by that.
That was Trump speak.
The bottom line is that they are trying to pin the tail on the POTUS. They are desperate to try to nail him with something, to delegitimize the presidency, to slow it down, to make him ineffective, the whole thing. I mean, it's quite obvious. I mean, you hear all the legal scholars talking about it, reviewing thus far no evidence of collusion, no evidence of obstruction for justice. They are desperate to try to find something to pin him with and his administration, and that's what you see. But the problem is the people that are suffering and losing the most with this is the American taxpayers, because on and on you have these investigations, you have this money spent, and then, like Newt just said, what are we going to have a special counsel to investigate the special counsel? It just seems like it's never ending. Now, I want to be optimistic, like Dana said, potentially 3 months from now we're going to put a rest to this, but I'm not confident at all that that's going to satiate their appetite for trying to destroy the 45th president of the United States. I mean, it's quite apparent to me. And they'll say anything and do anything. You see the papers being very loose with their standards, 5 anonymous sources. And then they'll have to, oh, well, wait, that isn't actually true. And then they come forward with another story, and they couldn't get the collusion, and now they're going for the obstruction of justice, even though the head of the FBI said that he didn't feel that the president was trying to do this or throw him off course or obstruct justice. But we don't want to take him for his word under oath, whatever.
You have to admit, KG has a good point about these leaks, Juan. The Washington Post comes out with another bombshell saying the president is under investigation for obstruction. Trump's lawyer says that's not true. The ABC report says that's also not true. Is this another case of these leaks turning out to be wrong?
I think the president said it was true. But then Jay Sekulow came on and said, oh, no, you misinterpreted. The president didn't say it was true. He was reacting to the Post story. But the president is saying that this investigation
What if that's true?
And then Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday said, wait a second, you just said the president's under investigation. He and Jay Sekulow went back and forth, back and forth. And the fact is that Rob Mueller, the special counsel, has never said, and he should not say, whether the president's under investigation. What we know is that, as we pointed out on this show, I think Dana did it last week, that now people who are involved are being asked to testify, and their lawyers and everybody else in this satellite is talking.
Right.
And so that's what's going on. The reality is, though, I mean, this is a very difficult reality that Angus King, the senator from Maine, said this investigation is just getting started. It's closer to the start than to the end. He said about 20%. And Adam Schiff, the congressman from California on the House Intel Committee, said, basically, there's evidence, but not sufficient to present to anybody. There's just evidence sufficient to justify continuing the investigation.
Well, if it's not sufficient, then what are they doing?
Adam Schiff says he doesn't believe that there's any proof. He says that they hasn't seen proof, and he says there's not enough proof to take to a grand jury, so there's a little bit of a difference there. Andrew Weissman, this guy they just hired in Mueller's team, he's known as a witness flipper. He's taken on the mob, some crime families, and went after Arthur Anderson and Merrill Lynch. He's a pretty tenacious guy. He kind of operates, people say he kind of abused his prosecutorial discretion when he went after some of these Wall Street cases. He's now on Mueller's team. You think the White House is getting a little nervous?
Well, I don't know. I would like to think that everybody could focus on the fact that there is no evidence of collusion as yet. there's an investigation, just let it go forward. And this churning on it every day and worrying that somebody gave a donation to a Democrat 5 years ago, it matters at all. I mean, one thing I would say, if you think you want to be in Washington for a long time, while the First Amendment protects political speech and you are allowed to donate even though you work for the government, I would suggest maybe not, because then you're going, if you get called upon to serve in a public role, then you might be criticized like this. You know, I don't know if they expected him to hire Mr. Magoo. I mean, we used to, and remember, President Trump says he hires the best people. Maybe Bob Mueller is saying that I want to do the same thing to get this done, because these are lawyers that are
Magoo donated to Hillary also. Greg, anything?
Well, it's interesting. One of the arguments is that Mueller is hiring a lot of these guys because Mueller doesn't think there's anything there and wants to make sure that everything's on the up and up, so it doesn't look like he hired a bunch of ringers or biased people. So that's, I don't know who said that. Maybe it was Sununu. It wasn't my idea. You know, the media keeps saying everything is a smoking gun, except when there is an actual smoking gun. Like when there's a problem that you can actually assign blame to, like a real evil, whether it is, you know, gang crime or whatever.
MS-13.
MS-13, you know, but they're so quick to call every conversation obstruction when it's almost always an objection and not an obstruction. I think we need a Trump intervention, get the media in an auditorium and exercise their Donald demons. I was like this once. I was thinking about this. In 1992, when Bill Clinton was elected, I spent a year on an irrational tear. I thought he was Satan. I thought the world was going to end, and I felt that I really felt this way.
You believed in robots?
I hated him so much. I was 28. I was young and dumb and full of rage, and then that kind of like, over time, I kind of gave in and realized he was president. So I understand why people are so angry, but you got to let it go. There's a great headline. This is from CNN. When Trump is silent on Twitter, it says a lot.
Wow.
It says a lot. So when he tweets, oh, that's a bad thing. But when he doesn't tweet,
that's even worse.
It's even worse. I mean, that's crazy.
And I want the audience to know, Chuck Todd, Greg Gutfeld just said you're young, dumb, and full of rage.
I was talking about myself.
More terror in Europe today. Will it ever end? Back in a moment.
I was.
Fantastic.
Welcome back to The Five. More terror today on the other side of the Atlantic. Shortly after midnight, a van plowed into a group of Muslim worshippers in London. One person died at the scene and 10 were injured. The driver was identified as 47-year-old Darren Osborne, a white man from Wales, prompting concerns that the incident was motivated by revenge for a string of recent attacks in England carried out by Islamic terrorists. Authorities are investigating the attack as an act of terrorism. And then another terrorism investigation is ongoing in France after today in Paris, a man rammed his car carrying explosives into a police vehicle. Only the attacker died, thankfully. Greg, in London, this is a kind of interesting thing. So remember the terrorist, Abu Hamza? Mm-hmm. So he used to worship at this mosque. The government in Britain actually shut down this mosque. And after a period of time, the community came together. They reopened it, and it was really considered a model of assimilation. So it's very sad, I think, that this mosque was actually the target.
So true.
And is this possibly the beginning of what we might see as more backlash against these attacks?
I don't think so. I think we can all agree that attacking innocent people is wrong. So we don't want to look at this as a ping pong of, like, this happens, okay, this terror attack happens, and then this response happens, because that's not how it works. It's kind of almost like a straight vector, a contagion. When something, it just keeps, it's a bad idea that spreads to the vulnerable because the acts are so similar. If you look at it that way, then you can figure out how to stop it, because who's doing it the most and where is this idea coming from? And is it coming because people aren't responding to the initial one correctly? I don't know. But it's interesting to me that, you know, when you talk about terror, people will tell you that this is rare. But when backlash happens, they will tell you it's common. I would like to, they probably happen.
Backlash is very rare.
Yeah, I think it's very rare.
Kimberly, I was thinking about in France in particular, where they've seen a series of attacks as well, the amount of preparation and the money that has to go towards the resources, it could actually be quite exhausting for a city and its resources. I'm just curious what you think about
That's what they hope.
our position. Right, it has to try to wear us down. So we have to be in a position to be able to be fully funding any of the resources that we need over there, over here, wherever it is.
There can't be any financial, hesitation, and because that's what the terrorists are counting on. They want to see, to sow the seeds of chaos, of destruction, of fear, of financial instability, that we radically then will change our way of life, and then they feel that they win. It's an incredibly difficult problem to deal with, because as we've seen over and over again, in some instances there were hints, there were leads, there were suggestions that certain people should have been more closely monitored, that they presented as those that might commit acts of jihad, but then we have an issue of resources, and then you have the issue of balancing people's privacy interests, and you have an interest of, okay, as a society we want to maintain liberty and freedom, but at what cost are we willing to allow this and to be loose at the expense of public safety and the loss of human life? And this isn't a problem that's unique to the United States. It's all across Europe. We see it in the Middle East, and it doesn't, in my opinion, seem to be getting better. In terms of what they're doing. When you see some of the countries in Europe that have been quite, permissive in terms of multiculturalism and wanting not to offend anybody. Okay, assimilation, you bring up a great point. This was, one of the places that was hit was a mosque that was really trying to assimilate and be integrated in the community. It's like awful that this happened, there. And you saw one of the imams trying to prevent them from harming the man who had committed an act of terror against them. But I'm telling you, people in Europe should be really frustrated with this, in London and in France in particular, because they are getting hit over and over again like a terror piñata, and it is so outrageous to me. They have to do more, and they have to do a better job. They have to demand that of their leaders.
Jesse, there was some people wondering why President Trump didn't tweet about this, because he had tweeted about other terrorist attacks that have happened over in Europe, but not this one. Any insight as to why?
I don't have any insight into President Trump's tweeting habits, Dana. I'm
really?
very sorry to disappoint.
I thought that was in your world.
It is in my world. He actually follows me on Twitter and retweeted one of my things today just to mention something there. But you know what? Obviously,
that's why I asked.
He's got a lot on his plate. And, it would be maybe wise for him to tweet something about that. Maybe he's watching the show tonight and will tweet something.
Say hi.
How you doing, Mr. President? I want to say something that Greg talked about, and it's about motivation. I want to say at first, obviously, the guy that perpetrated this act is a sicko and deserves to rot in hell. But let's talk about motivation for a second. When a Muslim terrorist commits a heinous act like this, and everyone says he was motivated by radical Islam, the left never wants to say that. Oh, no, we don't know what his motivation is. And, religion has nothing to do with it. But then when some, Christian guy from England perpetrates an act of terror against Muslims, immediately the left said it's Islamophobia.
Well, it's a hate
crime. They know it's Islamophobia. They're so quick to know. I mean, I wish they'd use that same standard. And think about it, this is actual Islamophobia. We actually found a concrete example of Islamophobia for the first time.
And acting on it.
Yeah.
Juan, we'll give you the last word.
Well, I appreciate your point. I mean, there's no answer as to why Trump wouldn't pick up on this, because this is terror. But the answer that suggests itself is that he's interested in one type of terror. And that's where we get into the back and forth. And the back and forth, has been pointed out in this discussion, takes us nowhere.
Yeah.
It's a loser. I mean, the idea that innocent people worshiping should be attacked, and that the guy is not only saved by a Muslim, but then as he's leaving is screaming, "I wish I'd killed